Let's paint a hummingbird and a flower today. This one has been on my list for a while. I'm going to use 16 by 20 stretch canvas to give us a little bit more room to do detail. And I'm keeping the background color simple, just orange and white. If you do too much orange, you can blend it in with a lot of white. That's what I'm doing to keep it really soft. And I did diagonal strokes across my entire canvas. And then make sure you dry it for the next step. Now for the main flower, I'm going to start with a size 3 round brush and take some pink with dark red, just to get a mid-tone. And I'm going to do a large circle in the center of my flower. You can sketch it out ahead of time like I did, but I'm going to show you with the paint because it's just easier to see than the pencil lines. But either way, I would suggest getting a center point and then start by adding your first layer of petals around the outside because that's going to decide how large your flower actually is. I'm going to do 6 petals around that center point, and you don't want them to all be perfectly curved. Give them little waves in them. You don't want them to all look exactly the same, but something like that. So I did 6 petals around the outside. We have to do the layers on the inside. Now this top right corner of the flower is going to have a bunch of petals that are layered on top of each other. It's on the far side. So I'm going to have a bunch of little layered curves that are also wavy, and they're all kind of tilted towards that center point. But they're much closer together because they are on the layered side further away from us. On all the other sides, they're curving around that center point. So like this one on the top left, we're actually seeing the side of it that's curved in towards the center. And the rest of them towards the bottom left of the flower are actually curved up. So they may layer over top of that center point. And we're seeing the back side of them. So keep that in mind. That's why that center point is so important. I'm going to have another layer down here that is a little bit shorter. And because we're seeing the side, gravity may be pulling some of the petals down towards us, so we'd be actually seeing the inside of them. So I'm just gonna have 2 wavy curves that are going the opposite direction because they're falling towards us like that. Now, once you have your outline painted in, you can fill it in with a base color. I'm taking pink and white just to make it a little brighter, and I'm filling in the main section of each petal. Notice how I'm leaving a little gap at the bottom of each. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you still want to see where each individual petal really is. We're going to do that to each one, and don't forget down at the bottom we have those petals that are folded out, so you're going to still fill that in and leave a little gap there. Just so you can see to start adding the highlighting and shading. The more layers we add to this, the more detailed it will start to get, and you'll start to see each individual petal shape pop, which is really cool. Now, if you haven't guessed, I'm going for a simple peony shape today, but with this flower shape, you really could do a couple different kinds of flowers like carnations or roses. Just keep that in mind as you're adding the details. Now for the next step, I'm going to take just the dark red now and start darkening the center part of my flower and also filling in all those gaps that we left earlier. So at the bottom of each petal, you should have some shading. It's somewhat helpful to do this when the pink is still wet, but don't worry, if it dried, you can always go back in with more pink and blend in any rough edges that show up from the red. But you want to make sure you're brushing up a little bit of dark into the midsection of the petal. Each petal is going to have 3 different colors, a darker shading at the bottom, a mid-tone, see I'm adding just pink to blend in the middle there, and then the tops should be the lightest, so light pink and even white. So you'll see that more as we add layers. So these first bottom layers here, I'm going to brush in a little bit more red because we can see more of that petal. And then you'll see I'm going to grab just the pink alone, and while it's still wet, blend in that rough edge. There you go. You start to see a little bit of the 3 tones right in there. Don't forget that there would be shading in between the layers that are folded down and the ones that are still folded up towards the center. So I did like a curve that went all the way around and then still brushed the red up into the ones that are going up, blending that in, and then the ones that are facing out, the shading is going to be brushed outward instead. So you're going to see a crease in the flower when you start to do this, which is really cool. Ooh, it's starting to look 3-dimensional. Your eyes might start to go crossed because it's going to look like a bunch of blobs at first. We're really just doing the color blocking with the dark and the light. You can add more detailed layers as you go, but step back from it every once in a while just to make sure you're getting the shape that you want. So I'm just gonna blend in this one up here. And then to really help the petals stand out, I want you to grab just a little bit of white, and I'm also going to mix it in with a little bit of pink and outline each of the petals. It doesn't have to be a complete outline, but you want to highlight each just to give them a little bit more definition and fix up those edges, because a lot happened from when we started until now. But isn't this fun? It's a very methodical process. It's very calming once you start to get a feel for where the flower petals are. This is also a good time if you need to make any tweaks to the direction each of the petal is going, or if any needs to be layered over top of each other, make that change now before we add the detail. Now that's your base coat for your flower. The first thing we're going to do is darken the shading. And to do that, I mixed some dark purple in with my red. We're going to darken the deepest part of the flower here, right in the center. Don't lose your little petals that are layered in. You can blend those in a little bit, but make sure it's really dark. My circle turned into more of a wide section in between the middle petals. And then I'm going to take a size 3 round, or even a detail brush if you're not comfortable using a larger brush, with some dark yellow and white. I'm going to brush little lines coming out from the center into that mid area. It's pretty wide, see, I come up quite a bit. And then I'm going to tap it to make the little dots. I don't know too much about flowers, to be honest, so I'm not sure what these are called. Help me out if you do. But make little yellow dots all over the top of there, make it look round, and then tap in some white over top as well to make them pop. There we go. That's a simple flower. Now you could leave it like that, but if you want to do some more detail and make it fun, I'm mixing some orange and pink together to get more of a tropical color, and I'm going to have fun with each individual petal now. I'm going to brush in some of this color in different areas. I'm also going to add some more, again, of that dark purple in with my red and deepen some of my shading. The key word now is contrast. Make deeper sections of the shading and brighter highlights at the top. Like I'm going to take just the pink and add even more white to it, along with that orange color. Ooh, see, now they're really popping right there. You can be even more expressive with your brush strokes. They don't have to be perfectly blended. I was looking at multiple different pictures of peonies to get this shape, so it might even help to get a picture or a reference of the flower type that you're going for. And once you get all the detail that you wanted, as a final step, I take pure white, or at least very, very bright white, and I add little pops of highlights around the edges. That way each petal really stands out. Woo! I love it. Now, taking another size 3 round brush, I have multiple of this size that I use, so just get a round brush that you're comfortable for this. I'm going to paint a couple small little flower buds just by making a letter U and pointing one side up a little bit further and filling them in. I'm going to do 3 of them, all different heights, tilted different directions if you want. And then I'm going to add a little bit of shading. I'm going to add a little shading along the top here. That's going to be the center of the flower that's really dark, and some shading along the bottom. Underneath the shading at the top, I'm going to brush down some highlights, even have the highlighting coming around the edge. You can even make it look like it has a little back to it by adding some of that mid-tone back there. And blend just like you did with the flowers. Remember, highlighting along the top edges of the bud, kind of like with the petals, and then the shading is along the bottom. It really is a very similar process to filling in the petals. You just can't see as many of the layers because it's closed. Contrast is key, so darken your shading, especially at the bottom and in that middle section, and brighten your highlights. You can even add some of that other fun color with the orange and pink together. Have fun with your expression strokes. And once you get the shape you want, dot in a couple little dots of yellow. You're not going to see the little stems coming up to them, but have a couple little peeking up and then a couple little white dots for highlights. So cute. I love it. And we can't have floating flowers, can we? So let's add some stems. The big flower is going to have a big stem, so figure out where it's coming out from the center and bring it off the picture. Also make it a little thicker up towards the top of it because it needs to be able to hold on to the whole flower. And then for the little buds at the top, start at the bottom of the bud and then bring the line down, trying to match it up. They're going behind the big flower, but it's always easier to start from the bottom and pull down to make sure it's going the right direction. Make sure they're connected, so take some green, and I like to do 2 lines curving down from the edge of each into the stem. You can even bring a little bit up to the front of it, just to make sure it's holding on. And then you can thicken up the stems. Even with a detail brush, you can go back in and fix up any lines. Make sure they're all connected. And I also like to do a couple leaves, so I'm going to do just simple teardrop leaves today, not too detailed, because I want the flower and the hummingbird to be my focus. But just to make it more interesting, I'm even going to add a stem going off the picture, so I can add another big leaf over here. Just have fun with it. Couple smaller leaves coming up to the top, and notice how the leaves are all tilted upward. They're not facing down and they're not coming straight out. They're growing up towards the sun. And once you get your blocking in there with the green, go back in with some bright green and the dark green and add highlighting and shading. This is also a good way to make sure you're doing a second coat, because as you can see, the green is a little bit transparent. But I'm going to pretend that the sun is coming from somewhere in the top right side. So you're going to see my highlights mainly on the right side of my stems and my leaves like that. And I like to go back in then once I get all of my highlights and even brighten up some more of the highlights. So I'm taking just the bright green now. Don't worry, if you do too much, you can blend it in with some of the dark green, but it just really makes all the colors pop. Don't forget to fix up your flower if you accidentally got green in it. And once you finish the details, there's your flower. That could be a painting in itself, but let's do the hummingbird. I'm so excited for this hummingbird. So take a pencil. I'm going to sketch an oval that is lined up with the rosebuds, but tilted up to the left. See that? And I left room for my wings. Pick 4 colors. Hummingbirds have so many different colors, but pick 4 colors. You can have multiple shades of one of the colors. I have multiple shades of blue, for example. And I'm going to fill in my oval with just plain blue. We're going to block in some shapes first. So the main body is going to be one color with another color. Then I'm going to do another oval that's above the body, but off to the left, and it's sideways. So it's pointing in the direction you want the beak to go. And then dry it so we can connect it to the body. So I'm going to outline the top edge. I have dark and light green for this. Just bring it around the top of the head and then continue the line straight out almost until it hits the blue oval along the top of his back. Blend it in the middle there, but only go halfway, because the underside of his head, where his chest and neck are, I want to have purple. So I'm going to start on the bottom side of the green oval, but continue that line down again all the way out until it meets the body. Lines up with the green on the top, if you see that. And then anything in between, fill in. There we go. Now I want to add my 4th color, which is pink, and I'm going to give him a pink underbelly. Don't add too much to the blue oval. You can overlap it because you don't want him to have too rounded of a belly, but I'm bringing it all the way around the bottom curve of that oval. Great. Now let's add a tail. I'm going to take some blue now, bring a line coming straight out just a little bit, but then I'm going to point it down just a little bit there. Light strokes. I'm only using the tip of my brush, brushing out some blue. You could have just blue for a tail, but I like to add in the different colors, so I'm going to put a little bit of pink coming down there. I'm also going to add a little bit of green at the top. And why don't we even add, just for the heck of it, let's add some purple at the very bottom to fill it in. There we go. We also need some wings, so I'm going to take some blue and green mixed together, and I'm going to blend in where all these colors meet. See this section here? Right there is where the wing is going to be connected to the body. So I'm going to block off a little bit of color, and then I'm going to take a little bit of blue now, a little bit of white so we can see it, and do a point. See, this is going to be like a little arrow type joint there. That's the point where the wing is coming out. So I'm going to curve a line out like that. It goes up and out a little bit, almost going up to the corner, but not quite. And then I'm going to start taking the blue and just pulling lines in. See that little point where the joint is? Each line is getting shorter as we get closer to the body, but they're angled towards that point ever so slightly. You can trace it in if you want. See how they're all coming towards his body there. So I'm going to bring a line out here, and there's the guideline. You can draw a guideline if you're not sure. Just make sure you bring the wings out a little bit further so it blends in when you're painting them. and they're gonna straighten out there at the very bottom, all going into that joint point. And once you have that, there's a wing that we might see on the back side. So on just above his neck area at the bottom of the head, have a line coming out not as far, and do some tiny short little feathers. You're really seeing the back end of that wing, but you might see a couple little feathers peeking out like that. There we go. And then once you got the general shape, fill it in with a nice base coat. I have some of the background showing through, so I'm just filling that in. Now for the beak, take a detail brush and just continue off the tip of your oval. Originally I was going to point it to this top flower, so I'm just bringing it out to a point, and then I'm going to take a little bit of green, bright green, and just smooth that out to connect it to the head. There we go. Also, while I have the detail brush, I'm going to add a little black oval there and add kind of the outline of a teardrop or a cat eye shape here going around there above where the purple is. Fill in on either side of that black some dark green, just blocking in that. And I'm even going to give him a pink little cheek. I don't know what this is called on a hummingbird, but there's a few of them I've seen that have it. It's almost like another little teardrop shape, but I'm going to have a flat edge on that one side where the purple is and curve out some white lines. Oh, he's so cute. Now his beak, look at this. I wanted it to go up to this top flower, but I decided that was angled a little bit too far. It probably would have been fine, but I wanted it to come out a little bit straighter, so this is why it's important to have such a plain background for this. I just took the background colors and blended it back in pretty easy, and then just tilted it down a little bit more. There we go. Now he's going a little bit closer to the flower. Wow, so now we have the base layer of color. We can start fixing up the different shapes and adding detail. This is where the magic happens. I'm going to bring up my pink just a little bit more. I straighten that up. I'm also going to take a detail brush and add a little bit of highlight along this curve here and some on the top of the wings. Don't forget to do a little triangle here on the back of that wing point there to make it look like it's attached to the body. See that? And now, in each colored section, I'm going to take my detail brush, and you know how hummingbirds are almost iridescent. They look like they have glitter on them sometimes, which is so cool. I'm just taking some purple with white now and tapping in texture in this purple section. We're going to do this in each of the main areas of color. So I'm just lightly dotting it on. I'm leaving a little bit of dark around the edge. And then I'm going to take white, and anywhere I think the light would be really shining on it, I'm going to dot on just a little bit of white. I have the brush slightly tilted towards me, so I'm getting that feathery texture. Don't forget highlights on his beak. I'm going to do the same thing down here in the pink, but to blend where the pink and purple meet, I'm going to bring a couple dots of purple into the pink, and same thing with the pink, I'm going to bring a couple pink dots up into the purple, and then do the same thing in the pink area. Pink and white on my detail brush. Again, I have the brush tilted a little bit so you can use the side of it for some longer dots, and just dot the entire thing with texture. He's already starting to look shimmery, which is really cool. You wouldn't see as much texture down here where it's shaded, but I am going to bring a little bit of pink up into the blue as well. Let's even add a little bit of that orange and pink combination from when we did the flower. That's pretty with these colors, and dot it in. I'm just going to add a little bit more texture there. Also going to add blue the same way. I'm using a bright blue, a teal blue, and a green blue with white all together. Not in any particular order, but those three together always make a really pretty combination. And I'm gonna bring a little bit of blue down into the pink to blend it, and some loose little lines underneath the wing. The light isn't shining quite as much right there. But along the midsection where the light is shining, I'm going to add little dots of white like that. Let's add a couple strokes of blue down into the tail and back area. And for his head, I'm going to take light green now, and I'm going to do the top of his head. I'm also going to make even brighter the section around his eye. And I'm going to invert the colors. I'm going to take dark green and do tiny little dots along his forehead and top of his head. And on the back of his neck, oh, I changed my mind. I'm going to do darker green. Some of that light green is showing through, but then I'm going to invert it and do really bright green and white along his neck, the back of his neck right there. So the dark and the light green meet in the middle. Love that. Maybe I'm going to add a couple little dots of white at the very top of his head where the sun is shining as well. He's so shimmery. It really, if you step back, does look like he's shining. I'm also going to smooth out above that bright green curve above his eye. And it's all in the details. I'm going to take some of the blue from my wing and give him a blue iris there. And don't forget little shines or pops of white in the middle and along the edges. His wings also need a little bit more work because they look so plain compared to his body now. So I'm going to take some brighter shades of blue and add lighter streaks of feathers. I'm also going to take a little bit of dark purple in with my darkest blue and deepen the inside of his wing area and the backside of that outside wing. You can even add a secondary color. I'm going to add some purple along the outside edges of my wings, just piecing it in. I'm not going to add all the colors, just purple and blue for my wings, but that's up to you. Add some more highlights anywhere you think that needs to pop on the bird now. I'm going to do some on the outside edges of the wings here, and also in the tail, I'm going to take a detail brush and blend in a little bit of white as well in with those colors. I'm also going to add a little bit of shading to the underside of my hummingbird, just right underneath the bottom part of his belly. See that? He would be darker on the underside where there's shading, but right where the blue and pink meet is the curve, which would be a lot brighter. So I'm going to go back in and add some more dots of white. That's where the sun would be hitting it a little bit. And then as a final touch, we need a foot. So we're only going to have one foot, so if we're seeing the side of him, use the tiniest little brush you have. I'm going to do 3 little tiny curved toes coming out of the underside of his belly. I did brown and black for that, and I'm also going to add little highlights, even add little tiny nails there. And let's see, a little bit of shading along the top of his foot. I made it a little bit thicker where it's coming out there. There we go. And as a final touch, I'm going to just fill in any gaps along the really textured edge of his wings because hummingbirds usually have more of a straight edge on the wing. Add final pops of white anywhere you want it to pop, and there we go. This one was so much fun. I love the colors. Remember, you can pick your own colors, make it your own as always. I would love to see how they turn out if you try it. And if you like this tutorial, follow me for more on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Have fun and happy painting.